So I'm Sandy Pentland. I'm faculty here. Used to be faculty at MIT. Used to be faculty many places because I like to move around. I have attention deficit disorder, right? Here I run a couple of programs. One is loyal agents. So we have noticed that everyone's building agents, but nobody is building agents to defend me. So I want agents that help me do things without, self-dealing and stuff like that. We had a great meeting yesterday with the heads of all the AI companies talking about a couple of things. One is, how do you actually do things that are not self-dealing? How do you do things that aren't going to get you sued? And one of the hardest things is, how do you get AI to really understand what you want? What are your preferences? AIs are just not really good at taking other people's perspectives and understanding them in detail. They can do stereotypes, but but they really can't do people. So Diyi is a rising star here at Stanford, and is one of the few people who's really knocking them dead in that area. So tell us, what's the truth about this, and what's going to happen?
So I'm Diyi. I'm assistant professor in the computer science department here at Stanford. I work on large language models. So recently, a few directions I have been thinking about. One is actually around the future of work with AI agents. This is a topic I wasn't very familiar like last year, but I get into this because I've been thinking about with the recent generative AI, what should we teach to our students? We got parents asking like which major my kids should take. A lot of questions like that. More importantly, I think on a technical level, it's about how could we build AI that would augment human capabilities. With AI, how can we do some tasks that we were not able to do in the past? So that's the question I have been thinking about these days. We did a large-scale audit of US workforce in terms of what workers want from AI, and we showed that investment and research has a very big mismatch with what the people actually want. Along this line, I have been thinking about how to upskill workers, where we build AI systems to do practice and give feedback to workers in diverse fields. Another kind of random thing that just came out 2 weeks ago, you can check out my LinkedIn about a generative interface. So I really don't like ChatGPT giving me like thousands of words as output. So instead, we actually build an interactive space. So any query, you actually have an interactive space for you to interact. So if you want to learn piano, instead of 1,000 words of what a piano is, we give you a piano keyboard where you can tap to hear the sound. So that's about it. I care about how we can use AI to augment human.
So you're using AI basically to complement the people, but it still doesn't mean that the AI understands the people. Right?
That's a long way to go.
Yeah. So Laura, this is your job. You're a partner at Deloitte. You help people put AI into companies and make the company work. How's this all going?
Yeah, well, it has been quite a shift as you think about large organizations getting excited, but then having really large audiences of very diverse sets of people in their workforce to use AI. So what we have seen over the last 18, 24 months is executives were very excited. You have a lot of the influencers, so they're generally younger populations who are AI native, and then a lot of kind of managers in the middle. So it's been very interesting seeing what actually sticks. How do people contextualize using AI? It's not enough to just say we've got the technology, but people really need very specific guidance around what does our company believe and how we're going to use this. So trust in their leadership around how it's going to serve everyone. Then a very clear expectation of how they're supposed to use it. And then truly hands-on learning to what does it mean for them in their job on a day-to-day basis. And that change management curve, I think, is still very much at the beginning as more and more technology is available to them, figuring out how do we contextualize it? And you mentioned agents. Certainly, what does that mean in terms of the shifting skills that are needed in the workforce? Not just at the early career levels, which we hear a lot, and there's some great research coming out of these organizations but large companies that have a lot of people employed today. So better understanding what skills do people have in my workforce today, truly what are the jobs, the tasks, the roles that we think are different, and then starting to paint pictures of what those learning journeys are to reskill them and putting resources around them.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I believe 100% of what you're saying, but it would be really nice if the AI sort of knew what was supposed to happen, like the intent of the organization or the person, and they don't seem to do a really good job of that. So it's putting the burden on the human to figure out how to manipulate the AI into doing something. I had a conversation with the chairman of Capgemini. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I did. And what he thought was an interesting thing is to build like AI buddies, which took all the manuals and memos and stuff, and it could just answer questions like an interactive manual, right? So it's a little bit like what you're saying and a little bit. And his idea with that was that if you had that, then employees would have more context, which means that you can make work from home, gig employees, much more integrated into the whole company. Does that sound like something you see people doing?
Yes, exactly. Especially in onboarding, for most people, that's a huge lift in the organization. Not just for new grads or new employees learning what it's like to be at a company, but also what it means for everyone else who is really busy in their day-to-day to support them. So a very common use case is taking what's contextual about what projects people are working on, what does our company stand for, all of that, making that more interactive as an onboarding guide, and with really the intent that then you're helping people get to their productivity faster as a new hire, but also much higher engagement, which you can measure by the sentiment of how they're feeling and do they feel like they have the tools and the resources and the people to make them successful. So ideally, that's a win-win for both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just to chime in here, I guess just going back to the intent from a technical perspective, I think the paradigm that we use today is that we either have this kind of supervised fine-tuning or doing this kind of learning from human preference with some kind of reward. Most of those settings are quite local or utterance level, so you give them a very short snippet and then try to enforce input and output alignment. This actually kind of contradicts to some extent if you have a longitudinal task where there are like a long range of interactions and getting the reward and the signals correct is just like a very hard. I think this is part of the reason why still models feel like they don't understand human intent, because I think most of the learning right now happen in the local level. Another thing, going back to what you mean in terms of this kind of contextualized, I think when we think about building agents today, a lot of those development are more from a normative perspective that, let's do this kind of software engineering agent, and then they write a code end to end. But if you look at what the people actually need, how human write a code, like this kind of very workflow task, localized assistance, and to some extent a very ambient assistance is missing. So if we really want systems that would work naturally, organically with workers, then how to actually find out this kind of localized ambient assistance in a more proactive way is actually going to be a big challenge. One of the recent system we released is called a Gumbo. It's very intrusive. I see it in the very front, where it actually, we record the worker's screen 24 hours per day, and then take a screenshot every 10 seconds. And of course, we take care of privacy very seriously. And then from a research prototype perspective, you can actually infer what the person is doing, what type of task they are working on, what a bigger task they are working on. And this actually gives you a very strong generative user modeling. And this is a very good way to think about what users actually need. I think we are now kind of moving more towards this kind of break context and then really like generative user modeling perspective.
So one of the things, though, that I hear in what you're saying, I'm going to duplicate a system we built called Deliberation.io, which just reflects on people. It doesn't add any fact. What I hear is you're talking about individual workers, but you said things like when there's a whole chain, things get lost. So it's like the telephone game, right? And there's a number of places for instance, in finance, where you see lots of agents coming together, and you get flash crashes, and you get spikes, and you get all sorts of crazy nonlinearities and stuff. It seems like to actually automate large chunks of the corporation, you need to have a sense of what is supposed to be happening and what are the people supposed to be doing, and it's very context sensitive. But that's a real challenge for LLMs now. Maybe you would go first, because you're in the trenches about this, right?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts because I think the pandemic revealed for most organizations that we have no idea what people do here. and when we look at things like job roles or job titles, most people in organizations say, oh, that's not what actually people do. That becomes extremely difficult then if you're going to be looking at who are you, what's your persona, what do you do, and trying to have an organized way of then what kind of, what's your skills of the future, or what AI needs do you have to best serve the work that you do. So I love that we are looking at roles and jobs. That's one lens. The other one is looking at those processes, like you mentioned, finance.
Right.
That's an area where there's been a lot of standardization over the years. And large organizations like a company like Deloitte, these are areas that are very standard. We have very kind of large process maps of here's what happens, step 1 through 500. And those are things that many people early in consulting learn to use. What is a process? How do you optimize the process? It's become very interesting pulling back out those maps, which can seem very academic, because now when you're thinking about agents need to take on the work, we actually have a blueprint of what the work is and where we could be, where we could be automating, where we could be augmenting the human in that workflow. So it no longer becomes just, well, let's do a use case to hypothesize, or I call it like death by 1,000 use cases. We can actually come with some hypothesis around here are the areas that drive value in your organization, and then here's where you might build an agent, use an agent in different parts of the workflow. Of course, then thinking about what else do our humans do, which is a very different, separate but related topic to that.
I'm going to disagree with you to make the panel sounds a little bit spicy, but I like what you said. Yeah. So yeah, I disagree in a way that I think I used the word previously about normative. I think we always assume that there is a blueprint, there is a workflow, and then we will build agents to mimic that. But actually, agents and human work very differently. So recently, we have been analyzing like how agents do the task, how humans do the task. So humans use very diverse UI tools. Agents like writing Python functions. Human like doing back and forth check. Agents just does it one pass because maybe it's correct and fast. So I think if we think about a lot of the tools that we have, people are creative. Workers are very creative. They find their own ways to deal with it. A lot of the task or task delegation are actually emergent in the sense that we actually don't know how to predict. So instead of this kind of like, I guess like a prescriptive way of building agents, I think it needs to be very descriptive. You really need to look at how, like, if you give people access to AI, how would they use it for the type of things that they are working on? And then you form this kind of very descriptive emergence of tasks, etc. So it might be possible that our current database of tasks are just out of date. And because the nature of work is changing, people use AI in very different ways. And maybe that means that we need to add something new to our task database. Maybe we need to remove something from our task database. So this entire space is dynamic and emerging. So instead of like, oh, we know the ground truth, maybe we could be more descriptive and then see how people actually use it and then build the tools to facilitate such usage.
So this fits a little bit with sort of the way I think about things, which is, we're taught since we're little, to be logical and sort of reason things out. That's BS, right? we're lost most of the time, and we're just trying to figure out what's happening. We're watching other people. Oh, that worked for them. I want to do that. Or you heard something on a podcast. You try, and even in jobs that look very routine, as you're saying, people are actually finding ways to do things. Sometimes it's not good, but and that's not the way the LLMs are set up. They're set up to do very specific things. They're not set up to be explorers. Is that something that sort of resonates with you? I mean, you have your blueprints.
Right.
But the blueprints are theory, right?
Blueprints are in theory, and they're important at scale and in regulated environments and so forth.
Yeah, that's true.
I would say that what you shared really resonates with me is many organizations, especially who are starting with top-down AI strategies and said, we'll create change champions and we'll go to every function and see how they want to use it. It was reversed, right? Like, this is the opportunity for the reverse mentoring of often more junior level employees and truly using the word influencers. because how AI is spreading in organizations, right? This separate maybe from academia or other environments. It's some people who are using it, find it really helpful. They're like, I've got a hack. Then they create a lunch and learn series. They share with each other. It kind of has a groundswell. And that's been very different about this tech disruption, I think, than others that I've seen that could be a little bit more command and control, had a timeline, had a milestone. Like, this is very different in that people are constantly experimenting, and then even in large organizations where you have these influencers who already exist in the organizations, you just have to create a platform to identify them, that they emerge and become kind of leaders in here's how I actually work, here's a hack on how to do this, which is often better than some process flow because they're able to share that information in a scaled way.
So if you don't mind, let's go up 2 levels here, right? So I was having a conversation with a head of a large organization, I'm not going to name it, recently, was saying, already we're not hiring young computer science people because they generally don't have the experience with tools and things like that, and we just don't know what's going to happen, and we see all these AI tools generating code, so do we need them? And then if you take that logic the next step further, you say, well, what happens to lots of jobs? Right? And what happens to the company, that had like 10,000 people or 100,000 people, and now it's going to shrink down? Like this conversation I had with Capgemini, they were going to cut full-time headcount to a third, but they were going to add an awful lot of gig people. Well, that's like sort of an intermediate. Where's this all going to go? I mean, what do you see people thinking about there?
Yeah, I think that for organizations right now, what you're seeing is the change in maybe hiring at junior levels is sort of a stopgap measure because they already have a lot of people in their organization to manage. So they're not, what the data says is people are not being laid off right now or to have savings. But what organizations can look at is their levers of hiring and, make it not approve as many hires and start to really look at the entry level of where they're going to make some of these reductions. I think it's pretty short-sighted, though, because there are all these experiences that you need and people you need in your organization who are going to become the junior engineer, the senior engineer, and really thinking through, like, how profound is it if we don't have some junior capability in our organization and risk to our talent, truly risk to the talent pipeline of not having individuals in those spaces. But it's not easy because looking at the way that those jobs are constructed today, we don't need as many of humans doing those tasks. So I was talking before about reskilling because when you hear about the hiring numbers and people and layoffs and not needing skilled workers, those are for the jobs as we've envisioned right now in 2025. And those jobs are changing very quickly of what we need the junior engineer to be doing, right? That's one of the areas that's changing the fastest and needing a forward deployed engineer, someone who actually was working along with customers and understanding kind of their specific needs in addition to their coding background.
So that's one of the things that you hear in like all the sort of seminars here is that you can't make your career like a T, you've got to make it more like a pie. So yeah, CS skills, but also customer skills or CS skills plus marketing skills or something, because it's not about the technology, it's about how do you use the technology and reimagine the process, which is a real big change from the way they're taught, right? So universities and schools need to get on board about this. Is this the sort of thing that you see in what you're doing?
So actually just going back, and I'm going to disagree again.
Oh, good.
I
like
Good.
I like the fact that whenever you two said junior researchers look at me, so I need to disagree. So first is that for the earlier work I mentioned about the future of work with AI agents, we actually do see this kind of skill shift where a lot of the highly paid jobs today, the top skills are analyzing information, analyzing data. So from our preprint, we see that the shift is going to be prioritizing and organizing information, training others, etc. So it actually aligns with a lot of the insights you shared. I think one aspect here is actually about this kind of AI literacy. So part of the reason why sometimes junior researchers are in a position to quickly become AI native is this kind of AI knowledge is just widely accessible among peers, among the resources that they can have access to. So I think going back to this kind of job reskilling, scaling thing, I think AI literacy is really something we need to think about. And then the other kind of phenomena, again, I'm not an economist, But there is this kind of J curve whenever there is a new technology being introduced, that in a short term, you are going to see this kind of reduction in terms of profit, in terms of reduction in terms of headcount. But in a long term, this is going to go crazily positive. I think similarly, this is what I have been thinking about with AI right now. So you mentioned that they can help us with tasks and they may help us better or more faster or whatever. But the reality is that we need to look for more tasks that we could work on. So if the competition is only about human and AI for the current pool of tasks, of course, I think our choices are becoming more limited. But the push should be we are going to have more and more tasks. And there are a lot of fields that would benefit from AI. So if you think about, again, going back to the future of work with AI agents, you all should check it out. We actually found that right now, a lot of the investment and the research only focus on a few agentic tasks. Either it's about coding, about research, like deep research, or about web navigation. So that's the highly profitable, but it's a very narrow domain of task. So if AI is going to be very beneficial for the society, we would imagine like people who work in grocery store, people who truck drivers, people who work in hospitals, people who work in diverse occupations would see AI benefiting them. I don't think we are there yet. And there is also no like technical evidence that, oh, once we solve coding and web navigation, all the skills will transfer to other research fields or to other domains. I think that part we don't have evidence. So it might be possible that by opening up to more tasks and domains, we'll have unique technical challenges. Maybe we'll move into a next level. And then definitely we have more tasks to focus on. So our competition is with better human capability and reachability rather than just competition with the current pool of tasks.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, yeah.
I was going to say where I really agree with that is there's an over-indexing right now in productivity as a word. Like I heard myself say it and I cringed a little bit because that it feels like the wrong measure versus a word you didn't say, but I was thinking there was like value of all these other things we could be doing, and that's sort of the limitation of our own human imagination of deeply understanding problems and where else we could apply AI. So I certainly agree because it's very frustrating when the conversation gets limited to today's tasks, doing today's tasks better without truly this what might be possible. And there's some data in organizations that companies are really thinking about that and have shifted to that, and others who are kind of trying to hit to the bottom, and that's like a very dangerous game, I think, of just hammering on the productivity. And by the way, not a very inspiring one to your workforce.
So one thing you mentioned, which I would put in a very different thing, is AI for basic research. So for instance, we've done things where we're talking a couple hours here about analyzing the microbiome and finding ways of doing that using AI that are just absolutely blow you away, double the efficacy of drugs, things like that, right? Amazing. Who knows where that's going to go, but it's going to go. Same thing with being able to understand paths in science and technology and sort of being able to forecast an investment. This is going to be a thing, I'll tell you, right? But the conversation I had with this sort of senior person in the finance area was, look, we run a financial firm. That's just going to be AI. We don't hardly need anybody. Maybe we need somebody to talk to the stockholders or something. But what's going to happen with this? And the conversation was around, well, we're going to have to differentiate what you do. This is a little bit what you were saying. It's not just going to be doing these sorts of transactions. We now have to sort of move out and help our customers and everybody do all sorts of things. And I sort of like that because it's sort of reinventing society. And that seemed to be what you were saying, yeah? And is that something, because it seems like that's going to take a while. Yeah. Is that something you talk about with your customers?
Very much so. This came up, I don't know if anyone here was in the founders panel, one of them yesterday, where they said, like, will VCs cease to exist? And a hypothesis that it could be in the future, not in the immediate future, but the capital allocation, so all of the financial modeling and what could be a successful companies would be decoupled from the advisory nature. And we see a pattern like that starting to emerge, like in big consulting firms, of what is it that we do that's rote and can be done faster.
Oh yeah,
and
consulting is one of the ones.
And then what's advisory, and how do we amp up the advisory and really have that as a human in the loop that's helping organizations with information they need about market dynamics or industry domains.
Yeah, super good.
Maybe we can do a few audience questions.
Sure.
we end, because I think ending on a point about VCs having to do even less work, so I can get back to the things that I
There we
really love
are,
about
yeah.
my job, which are
got
board
you.
dinners and schmoozing.
So he had
so-
his hand up first, and
Okay.
then you, maybe, and then you.
So really appreciate these comments. We're building a distributed agentic platform for personal intelligence, as we call it. And so I'm very intrigued by the challenge of how you capture intent and imagination. Like,
Absolutely.
we're very good at capturing everything else, but we're now at the edge where we need to figure this out. So the first question is, what are best practices to do that? And I'll just say as a follow-up, how do you think about privacy? Because it feels like in a surveillance economy, which is what we have today in the United States, this is like literally the key question, because nobody is going to want to have
Okay,
their
so look
themselves
at
field scripted without that.
loyalagents.org, okay, which is Consumer Reports and us and the law school. And yeah, consumer intent, personal intent is really a key question. The interesting reason for doing this is that if you own the AI, you don't have to share data to get results. And so it really changes the power in the data market. You should look at it and see.
Meaning the individual owns their own AI, correct?
Yes, their own AI and their own data. And you only release what you need to be able to get the services you want. That's a really different equation in terms of the dynamics of the market. So you had a question? And then you, yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So I heard you say a lot of words like productivity and processes and tasks and preferences and monitoring screens. But when I think of empathy, I think of something more heart-centered. I think of, like, in the workplace, a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, purpose, contributing to something bigger and greater than oneself. Where does that land in your work?
Yeah,
The name of the thing is, why don't LLMs have empathy? It's not that they do. So I'm sorry if you thought that we were going to tell you how they do that, but Diyi will tell you the closest thing.
no, I think empathy is actually embedded in many of the conversations here. So from Laura and I talk about like what the workers actually want. So we want to build technologies that would really empower people. Even going back to personalized intelligence. This is about if you are going to work with this kind of AI tools, they need to really understand you. And the personalization can mean a lot of things. Personalization could mean that they need to know your demographic information. It could also mean that they need to know your workflow, your styles, your style of writing, like a lot of the other type of personalized workflows, etc. And then I think a lot of the theme here is about how we could augment the human capabilities and build AI that really empower people who use them. And going back to some of the things I mentioned earlier, I think we need to really think about how to move beyond this kind of task success or a localized performance metric, but moving towards something longer term. How could we build AI that would appreciate or would support our well-being? Rather than just like please us, give us answers for every turn. Are there any other modalities that maybe I wasn't very pleased with the current conversation, but after multiple conversations, I feel like I become more critical. I become a better version of myself. Like there might be other long-term metrics that we could optimize. So that's where care and empathy come in.